Each week, nearly a dozen movies are released theatrically. 40 films a month, more than 400 a year. That's a plethora of cinema. Too much cinema. You'd have to be an addict to see all that. But don't fret. We've got you covered. This is Cinematics.
Hey everyone, it's a new episode of Cinematics. This is episode number 225. I'm joined by my better Eric Holmes. Eric, how are you doing? 1 o'clock on Pacific time. Tired? Been watching too many movies? What's going on with you? A lot of interviews?
Yeah. All the interviews. I just did them all.
You just did them all?
Yeah.
What are some of the interviews that you've recently done? I think you did an interview with the director of Which Brings Me to You, I believe.
I did. We got that. We got two of the actors for Sunrise, which we'll also be covering. No one from One More Shot, but we will be talking more about that movie next week when Bruce is back, hopefully with him.
Yes, Bruce is absent for this episode, but not really absent because he actually taped a segment on movies that he missed for the year 2023. So I think I haven't listened to that segment yet. That segment will be at the end of this episode as well. And I'm going to try this out. We're trying this out. Eric and I are going to do just a very quick mini spoiler on one of the movies we're reviewing, Driving Madeleine. We're going to leave that after the Bruce Purkey segment. So it's weird. I know after this episode, when we sign off, we're not just going to sign off because you can cut right into Bruce. You can actually seamlessly go right into Bruce's segment. And then I would advise, if you have not seen Driving Madeleine, which I don't know what Eric thought of the movie. I haven't asked him yet. I really enjoyed it so far. I'm not so far. I just really loved it. We're going to do a quick little spoiler at the end. So you'll get kind of 3 treats for episode number 225. Speaking of Bruce Purkey, we also have to mention for Patreon, he is the picker of this month's Patreon for January. And his movie is, I believe, a movie called Son of Rainbow or something. I haven't even looked that up.
Oh,
That is
Son
for
of Rambo.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Son of Rambo. Do you know what that is? Son of Rambo? Is that?
It's been a while since I've seen it, but a kid really likes Rambo and stuff happens.
And then stuff happens. All right. So that is Bruce's pick, Son of Rambo for the year 2008. And for our Cinematics Patreon members, you can vote on what movie or request what movie you want, other movie you want us to pick for this month's Patreon for Cinematics. Also, we have to mention that on Saturday, we will be joining Jason Kleberg, me, Eric, and Bruce for, what would you call it, that Force 5 episode, Eric?
It's like a 2023 year in review sort of thing.
Yeah.
Gotta come up with like a top 10, really, top 5, and then 5 honorable mentions, and still not sure what I'm gonna put on there. Like that,
Yeah.
there's definitely some that are definitely gonna be on there, and I think me, you, and Bruce, whether we do it on the First 5 show or do it on our show, we're gonna have our collective top 5 of the year. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's 5 movies that I don't have to worry about those. That'll be on our collective list, so I can just concentrate on whittle down the list a bit because there's a lot of bangers in 2023.
Right, there are a lot of bangers from last year. And for Jason Kleberg's Force 5 podcast, we're going to, yeah, like Eric was saying, it's sort of a best of the year thing. So that'll be sort of our best of the year thing with on Force 5, so we can share our top 10 lists and different categories that Jason has on his podcast. I believe I did that best of with Jason a year ago. My old age is horrific, so it's ravaging my brain. But I've been on Jason's wonderful show twice before, and I'm really looking forward to joining it up again. And Eric, you've been on Jason's show before. Did you like your Force 5? Right, you've been on, right?
Yeah. It's me and Bruce did a actually, now that I think of it, we never paid that off, but we did a Kurt Russell draft, and yeah, I would pick a Kurt Russell movie, he'd pick one, I'd pick one, and then he puts it online, and people vote on which 5 movies they would rather watch.
Okay,
I think they just saw it. That one has a thing on it. I'll vote for that. It's like, wow, okay.
All right, so that was a previous episode of Force 5, but we will be there this weekend for Jason Kleberg's Force 5 podcast. That should be very interesting. I don't know. I'm trying to think of my top 10 for this year. I can't think of any. I think there's this movie called Our Father the Devil that I think I really like for our consensus podcast. We'll see. Regarding our collective top 5, we will have that on a future Cinematics episode. And the top 5 is interesting It's these are five movies that all three of us will probably give either 4.5 or 5 stars to. Movies that we feel are in award season might be overlooked or yeah, overlooked, underrated. Basically, five gems that hopefully you guys will see. That will be our cinematics top five. On a future episode, I'm thinking of dropping that episode or recording that episode close to whenever the Oscars are broadcast. So before the Oscars, you can see, well, maybe movies that are sort of off the beaten path that all three of us really, really loved. Now, going into movies that hopefully we really loved this week, we have three movies to cover, three features, main features. Sunrise, which brings me to you, and Driving Madeleine. Eric Holmes, you do the honor. Which of these three movies are you primed to talk about?
I was gonna say save the best for last, but I'm not sure which one is the best. So let's just go with the Sunrise.
Okay, so Sunrise is interesting. It stars Alex Pettyfer and it is directed by Andrew Baird. And it's one of these movies where you don't know how much you can really say about the movie. It stars Alex Pettyfer and Guy Pearce. You know, Alex Pettyfer possibly from Magic Mike or a movie of his that I really love called Backroads. Guy Pearce, you know, from LA Confidential and a whole bunch of other movies. Here's a short synopsis. When an ex-cop named Fallon returns to the scene of a horrific crime, the residents of a rural town soon discover that this dark visitor is really a vampire who feeds on blood and fear. That sounds like a really fun, interesting movie. Ex-cop, played by Alex Pettyfer. He's now a vampire. He's going to wreak havoc and maybe vengeance and yeah, blood-soaked vengeance in this town, this little small ramshackle town in the Pacific Northwest. Thing is, the movie itself is it's interesting at points. It's the genre is a thriller, 94 minutes. It's very moody and atmospheric, and there's some interesting world building regarding an Asian immigrant family who moved into the area, and due to the racism in the area. By the way, this section of this Pacific Northwest town is ruled by this corrupt, I don't know, businessman or something. He's played by Guy Pearce, and he's right from the get-go, he's a racist. Okay. And you can tell because he performs a very violent act to an Asian man at the beginning of the movie, setting a pretty much just a lot of dominoes falls. And what happens is this ex-cop Fallon, played by Pettifer, he comes into town, he's very tired, and this Asian family nurses him back to health. And it sort of brings in sort of like maybe a Shane element where will this mysterious figure help this Asian family find some healing and maybe turn the tables on the bully played by Guy Pearce and his minions. That is a premise of Sunrise, directed again by Andrew Baird. The writers Ronan Blaney. Eric, you've done the interviews. What is your thoughts on the movie?
This was not at all what I thought it was going to be. Because it started off like it was going to be a horror, and then really quickly it kind of turned into like a rural drama, like with a family drama with like racism and stuff back and forth. It almost to the point where like halfway through the movie, and every once in a while in the movie they go back to the vampire thing, but like even the vampire thing, it's not like, well, I'm a vampire, I'm going to kill everyone. It's like real subtle with it. So like as I was watching, I kept forgetting. I was like, oh, right, this is a vampire movie. And then you go back into the drama stuff, like the bringing up killing of two lovers, but it's got that kind of vibe. Or oh, what was that one with Billy Bob Thornton?
Sling Blade?
No. Oh, well, yeah, I guess that too. Devil's Peak, I think.
Okay.
Was
Never
that
heard of that. Devil's Peak. Oh, right. The family
yeah.
movie. I
Yeah.
forgot the name of that movie. Yeah. Anyways.
But it had kind of that kind of vibe to it. And so I kept forgetting about the vampire stuff. And then when it went back to the vampire stuff, I'm like, okay. So it's just kind of like an interesting kind of back and forth between genres. And not two genres usually see kind of married together the way this one does.
The narrative itself was a bit elliptical for me. I mean, no, it's elliptical and atmospheric and moody. It was interesting, but I was expecting a genre film, and it feels more like a mood, atmospheric piece. Beautifully shot. If you get into the entire vibe of the movie, I think this is actually worth a watch. But I felt a lot of times there are things in this movie regarding, they call the vampire a redcoat. There's a
Yeah.
legend of the redcoat in the movie about the story. that is, I wish they actually went into the whole legend of the red coat and what that red coat has an influence over this town. I wish a little bit more was explained, or maybe that is the whole premise of this thing, where a lot of the story gaps or the messages or themes will be filled in by the audience members, which I don't mind. The ending, the final act is pretty interesting as well. I really enjoyed it. I think there are a lot of very interesting things. I liked Alex Pettyfer and in this movie, he was very good as that sort of mysterious, somber dude. He doesn't really say that much. He has a good presence in this film. Guy Pearce, I would say it's overacting, but really not. It's really not overacting because this character is a total jerk and racist and just evil human being. So he's going to play him in a very arch manner. So yeah, overall, I thought a lot of very interesting moments in this movie. Is it a great thriller? Not a great thriller, but I think actually because of what the themes are regarding immigration, racism, also bullying, there's some really a lot of interesting mixes. I would give this a mild recommendation at 3 stars for Sunrise. It was an interesting movie, had its flaws, but overall I like the final execution of the film. So, Eric, a little bit more on this movie and then your rating.
Yeah, I'd probably go 3.5 on it. Could go higher. I was just thinking like the Scott Cooper movies. I know a lot of people don't like Scott Cooper for reasons I don't quite
Right.
understand.
Like Out of the
But
Furnace.
think of like out of the furnace, but with a vampire in it. Like if you're watching Out of the Furnace and you're like, could use more vampire, then this might be your movie, perhaps. But yeah, it's
Did the
again,
moody stuff, did the atmospheric stuff work for you in the fact that it wasn't a straight up revenge, bloody,
it
mano y
did.
mano?
It
Okay.
did, and I'm wondering that now that you've seen it, like if you watch now that you've watched the movie, knowing what it is, like if you went back to it, you know how like sometimes like you'll watch a movie and it's not what you expect, and it kind of turns you off a bit.
Yeah.
But then once you know, you'll go back to it and go, "Oh yeah, maybe I like this a little more than I did before," because you're acclimated to what it is already.
Oh, good point. Yeah. I thought it was there were some interesting elements to it. I would give it again that mild recommendation just because I really liked the way a lot of things were set up. Gets surprisingly pretty bloody at the end too. So
Yeah,
3.5 for you, Eric, on
yeah.
Sunrise. And then who did you interview just for what we're gonna release later on this week? Who are the people, the folks you interviewed for Sunrise?
It was Alex Pettifer. My brain sucks.
Okay, so Kurt Yeager, is that the other
Yeah,
guy or what?
yeah, Kurt Yeager and Alex Pettifer.
So who did Yeager play in Sunrise?
He was the cop.
Yeager
Yeah,
plays a cop in Sunrise, and he has an interesting confrontation with the Pettifer character. So Sunrise, it is in theaters January 19th, and actually towards the end of the interview, Eric mentions that, oh, people should see this in the theaters when he talked to Alex Pettifer. It's also going to be on digital and on demand, same day and date as its January 19th release in theaters. So if you don't see it in theaters, it's available on digital and not on demand. Tell us what you think of Sunrise, which is its distributor is Lionsgate. I like my share of Lionsgate films, so tell us what you think. Does this movie work for you? 3 stars for me. Again, 3.5 stars for Eric Holmes. Which brings us to a movie called Which Brings Me to You. And this movie to me I was expecting a very light rom-com and that would just waste away and watching a funny, just harmless 90-minute rom-com. Nothing wrong with that. This movie was a little bit more deep for me than expected, and that is a good thing. Stars who are the stars? Stars Nat Wolf, is that his name? Nat
yep.
Wolf,
And Lucy Hale.
Lucy Hale, and they meet at a wedding, and they make googly eyes at not googly, they make very animalistic eyes towards each other. They sort of
They
have that
make
instant
meet me in the courtroom to bang me out eyes at each other.
exactly. So they go to the coat room, they're about to bang, and for some reason, Nat's character, he cannot go through with the deal. He just wants to actually get to know her a little bit more, and the rest of the movie deals with how after a failed hookup in the in this clothes closet, they decide to start bearing their souls to each other. And a lot of this movie, of which brings me to you, also deals with vignettes or memories of each of their past relationships. So it's sort of when you think of which brings me to you, it's sort of like a before sunrise set. I think it's set somewhere in the Hamptons or somewhere in the East Coast. It's really beautiful and picturesque. Lucy Hale and Nat Wolff, they're very good in the movie, and they make a believable kind of quasi couple in the film. So it's beautifully shot, and I really like the flashbacks. Sometimes flashbacks and narratives, they seem like sort of just extra dressing, but I ended up really liking to learn more about their respective pasts and how eventually they try to reconcile their past, learn from their past, and move forward with each other as a couple. Do they make it at the towards the end? Well, that's a big question regarding, which brings me to you, Eric Holmes. Your review of the movie, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I like this one a lot. It's yeah, definitely a rom-com. I think the Before series is kind of this one's a little more broader than those kind of movies. It feels like probably just because as they go back and forth and kind of trade horror stories of past relationships. This one's a lot more broad, funny, I guess, probably more charming, I think. But yeah, it's I'm trying to think of like a really good example of this, but I don't get to watch many of these kind of movies, so I can't think of one. But yeah, just decent rom-com. I like the chemistry between Jane and Will, and I like the flashbacks work for me and getting I don't know if that Nat Wolf looks like the guy from Scrubs, but I do get
Oh,
like
Zach
a
Braff.
yeah, Zach Braff, but I do get like a heavy kind of Scrub sort of vibe from this movie. It's got that kind of tone to it, where it's mostly charming, kind of funny, and then at the end it gets like at the end of every episode of Scrubs it get like real serious towards the end. That's
Mm.
kind of what this does a little bit, and yeah, I dug it.
Movie is based on the novel, which brings me to you, a novel of confessions by Steve Almond and Juliana Baggett, and it was written by Keith Bunin, and the director is Peter Hutchings, who Eric Holmes also recently interviewed. Peter Hutchings, his previous movie before this was The Hating Game, by the way, which also stars Lucy Hale. I really enjoyed this movie. Surprisingly moved by the ending, just really enjoyed the whole story and the whole wrap up of the film. And yeah, for me, which brings me to you, is an above average romantic comedy. It's more than a solid recommend. This is like, yeah, go check this movie out. Especially if you're a fan of Lucy Hale, you might know her from what is that series? She was in the movie Truth or Dare. She was in Pretty Little Liars. Yeah, that's a series for years on end. And Nat
Uh,
Wolff, if you know her in The Fault in Our Stars, they do really good work in this film. John Gallagher Jr., who I really love, he was in the newsroom. He also has a really interesting co-starring role as a former lover of Lucy's character. He
yeah.
plays a writing professor in the film. Yeah, Eric, you want to say?
Also, Shannon O'Neill shows up at the very end. She didn't have much to do, but she's the Lyft driver at the end.
Oh,
She was
right.
in Uncle Peckerhead. She was
Okay.
the
Yeah.
I forget what her character is. She had a small part in Uncle Peckerhead too. People just need to put her in movies like more.
Oh,
Jen Jennings, she was the local person that would like sign local bands.
okay. Cool.
Small part in Uncle Peckerhead, but she was in Uncle Peckerhead, which is the important part. And then
Which
she
is
showed
the
up in this.
important part. So, which brings me to you again, hitting theaters January 19th. For me, I'm gonna give it a solid 3.5 out of 5 stars. Just this is one of those movies that might go up in the future. I just really liked it right down the middle. This is just a solid recommend, especially if you're a fan. I wouldn't say rom-com genre, but this is more like a rom-com with huge dramatic elements. So rom-com drama. This is a solid 3.5 out of 5 for me. What about you, Eric?
I will go 4 stars on this. And spoiler alert, probably do the same on the next movie we're about to talk about because there's a lot of crossover between what I liked about both movies.
Oh, very good. Okay. So check that out. 4 stars for Eric Holmes and 3.5 stars for me for which brings me to you. Finally, for our featured, we have Driving Madeleine. This is a movie that I saw last week. I was so excited for Bruce and Eric to see it. Bruce has not seen it. I don't know if he will get to see it. Maybe we can actually convince him to see Driving Madeleine. Here's the thing. The actual premise of the movie seems very sappy, but it's so well done. It centers on a French taxi driver. He is just barely making ends meet, and he's just flustered and pressured with his job, and he he gets a new job. I mean, not a new passenger. New passenger. The thing is, she is on the other side of town. But the good thing is, she promises a really big fare. It's going to be a really nice daily payday for this taxi driver. So he decides to drive across town. He picks up Madeleine, and the rest of the movie, it's him talking to Madeleine, who is an elderly woman. She is leaving her domicile for the last time, and she wants one final drive around Paris and its surrounding areas before, by the end of the day, he will drop her off at her nursing home while she will live to the rest of her days. So it is a bit, the premise seems a bit melancholic, and it is, but there is a lot of really interesting things about this movie. You get to learn about Madeleine's previous life, which I don't know how far we can into regarding she get with a very important lover in her life as well as a lifelong possible companion and child. You get to see the spectrum of her life, but then there are a lot of really heavy elements to Madeleine's story, a lot of tragic moments. And what's interesting about Madeleine as a character, she is played by Lean Reno, and Lean Reno is sublime in this film, by the way. She brings a lot of light behind the eyes of Madeleine. Madeleine, it's a very optimistic and strong-willed woman, as you will learn throughout the narrative. And it's really interesting and inspiring to see that she can still have a zest for life with everything that's gone before. And Danny Boone, he plays Charles, a taxi driver, and Danny Boone is equally good as the initially scruff guy who gradually warms up to Madeleine and her stories. Also have to mention Alice Isaz. She plays the younger version of Madeleine. And like Which Brings Me to You, the flashbacks in this movie have a really big part in the overall story structure of Driving Madeleine. I really love this movie. Towards the end, I'll be honest, I was pretty much teary. Tears were flowing after Driving Madeleine. May have been manipulative, but worked for me. Loved all of the areas of Paris and the neighborhoods they went to. So even if you just want to look at Paris as a travelogue, it works. But as just a really good drama and at times comedy, it works as well. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie. And this is one of those movies that I'm so glad on Cinematics we get to discover that is far from all of the movies that, no disrespect, that are that most people are publicizing on a weekly basis. This is a hidden gem that I'm going to give a huge rating for. And it's 91 minutes. It actually says it was released 2022. So I interviewed the director, Christian Carrion, and he said it was actually released in many countries. And I think one of the last stops is here in the US. Eric Holmes, your review and thoughts on Driving Madeleine.
This is almost the exact same movie as Which Brings Me to You. Almost. You got two strangers and they learn about each other as we learn about them. But this one's a little more one-sided because it's mostly about Madeleine's background. First of all, when I put this movie on, like the first 10 minutes or so, I was like, oh no, do I gotta watch this? I don't want to watch this. And it wasn't until like the first flashback when Madeleine really started getting into her backstory that I'm like, oh, okay, let's hear more. And then I think I started turning around to enjoying the movie around the same time that Charles did, because he's like, I don't want to talk to this old lady. I just want to drive you over to where you're going and, be done with it. And then she starts telling her story and it's like, oh, okay, do go on. Because that was messed up what just happened to you. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. Now where Which Brings Me to You was more light and fun, kind of like Scrubs. This is like the serious business. Like
Yeah.
as the movie goes on, it just gets you just feel for Madeleine because like life had just chewed her up and spit her out in so many different ways that you just kind of I forgot where I was going with that, but this is like the serious business version of Which Brings Me to You, where Which Brings Me to You is the light fun version. Driving Madeleine is the Oscar Beatty kind of version, and I like both of them. They're basically just both strangers meeting each other and developing a relationship. They're both love stories, but like, one's Which Brings Me to Use more of a romantic love story. This one's Driving Madeleine's more of a love story in the sense that Shawshank Redemption is. like, two people that love each other, develop a bond. Both movies are bonds through tragedy. Quite honestly, I think Driving Madeleine and Which Brings Me to You would be a nice double feature. Probably watch Driving Madeleine first, and then I need to cheer up a bit. So let me put on Which Brings Me to You so I can kind of cheer up a bit and actually go to sleep tonight.
Yeah, we'll be talking towards the end of the podcast if you want to listen to it. I'm going to ask Eric a quick question regarding the end of Driving Madeleine, and I want to see what his reaction to that film is. Did you get a little bit choked up towards the end? Did it get you?
A little bit, not too bad, because I kind of saw that ending coming. I saw that ending coming a mile away. Didn't mean it wasn't effective, but it's kind of like what they call it. That's when something ends the way the natural progression or something like that. Like
Yeah.
it ended where it needed to be. It was a good ending. I liked it, but at the same time, I was like, of course they went here.
Of course they went here. All right. Driving Madeleine. It was released last week on January 12th in New York and Los Angeles. Now the good news is January 19th is its national rollout, so it will be playing in select theaters, I believe, in over 80 theaters across the US. So that's a good news. Driving Madeleine, I believe it's a great theatrical experience, especially if you're looking for a really well done drama, which tugs at the heartstrings, but just great performances by Lynn Reynaud and Danny Boone and Alice Isaz. My rating for Driving Madeleine, 5 stars. I mean, it's a simple story, but I really loved everything about this movie. I'm gonna continue to rewatch it. What about you, Eric?
4 stars on this one too. Driving Madeline and Which Brings Me to You are two different sides of the same coin for me. They're
Okay,
they're
cool.
like wildly different flavors, but they're I mean, at its core, they're both exactly the same movie, and I like them both equally, just for different reasons.
Cool. All right. So that is it for the our featured. We're actually going to have a couple of very quick recommends before we close out this episode. Eric, very quickly, what do you have to say about Vishniac?
Vishniac is a documentary by Laura Bialis. It chronicles, I want to say it chronicles Roman Vishniac's life, but not really. It's a strange documentary. I guess we'll get more into it next week. It's a documentary about Roman Vishniac, told through his photography over the years, and told by his daughter, who recently passed away in 2018, but Mara Vishniac. And so it's kind of through her voice and his pictures. It takes you through World War II and takes you through it takes a weird turn at the end, but it's going to be playing in let me check here. It's going to be in theaters in New York on Friday the 19th, and in theaters in LA on February 2nd.
Okay.
So if you can check that out. Don't have a date yet for any streaming, but if you can check it out this weekend and you live in any of those two places, do so. It's a pretty good documentary.
Okay. And then you also we loved One Shot from a couple of years back, I believe. That's
Oh,
maybe
that's an
even
understatement.
yeah, we loved One Shot, starring the king of Eric's King, aka Scott Adkins. So One More Shot, you actually paid for it on digital. Was it worth the purchase? What is One More Shot?
Oh yes. One More Shot is basically Metal Gear Solid, direct to video Metal Gear Solid movie, and a very good one. One More Shot is just continuing that story. This time you got Tom Berenger showing up. You also have Michael Jai White. I will say, because this is, if I have one nitpick about this movie, I needed more Michael Jai White. He shows up like about 30 minutes in, and he shows up a little bit at the very end, but you don't get a lot of Michael Jai White. And I just wanted more. But I guess after this, they're gonna do One Last Shot. I think that's gonna be the third
That's
one.
cool. Yeah.
Maybe some people show up in that one. I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens. But
Are
yeah,
are
the,
there any other characters from the first One Shot that shows up to One More Shot, or is it just Atkins?
yeah, it's oh shoot, what's the guy's name? The main guy that Scott Adkins was trying to save in the first one.
Sure.
So this is, they leave the movie, they land, and then he's got that guy with him. So it's a direct continuation of the first
Oh,
movie.
that's awesome.
Yeah. And this one ends up pretty open-ended. There's going to be characters that continue on to the third one, I imagine. Because
Okay.
they left it on, I mean, it ended satisfyingly, but it also ended on a cliffhanger. Greg, I cannot wait for this trilogy to complete. I need to get this whole trilogy inside my head. And for the love of God, someone give James Nunn and Scott Adkins a budget so they can make a Metal Gear Solid movie properly. The only thing this is missing is like the over the top villains, the Psycho Mantis and Revolver Ocelot. You need characters like that in here. The one shot movies are essentially Metal Gear Solid.
You know what's so funny? One Shot, it's still, I'm sure people have seen it in the last couple of years. That's still such a highly underrated movie
Yeah,
with what they did. And you and I and Bruce, we see so many action movies. Very few reach the levels of One Shot, right?
yeah.
I mean, it's so good. And what, so One More Shot is almost sustains. I mean, it's hard to sustain that one shot level, but it's still a very, very good movie,
I
right,
I
Eric?
still think the first one's better, but we're talking like one's a 5 and the other one's a 4.9. You know, that's it's like that one's better, but like not like, oh yeah, this one's gold and this one's dog poop. It's not like that, but
All right. So how did
it,
you, is it on
it's
digital right now, on demand? Is that how I got it?
yeah, you can rent it for like $4 or $5, something like that.
Okay.
And then hopefully when the third one comes out, they'll come out with like a Blu-ray box set. Um, Or maybe once they come out with the third one, they'll re-edit it. The whole thing is one movie, call it One Long Shot. And it's just
Right.
all three movies like glued together, like the Kill Bill, the whole bloody affair. That
You
would
know
be
what?
sweet.
Well, you know what's cool is you can actually do one shot and one more shot, right? Back to back now.
Yeah.
And that'd be probably a cool viewing experience at home, right? Just to
Yeah.
see those movies back to back. Like you said, it's just a seamless continuation of what happened from one to the next, right?
Yeah.
So, wow. So
But yeah,
yeah.
I'm looking so forward to the third one. If they stick
So,
the landing, this will be like one of my favorite trilogies of all time.
wow. Okay. So, one more shot. What is your rating?
At 6.9. Well, no, we'll go 5 on this one because like I said, I did like one. I think I gave One Shot a 6.9, and
Yeah.
I like that one a little bit more than this, so I'll go 5 stars on this.
5 stars for one more shot. That is
Now, keep in
probably,
mind, my taste might not be yours, but this
you
was a
know
good one.
what though? One Shot is one of those movies. I feel like I don't know how you cannot love that movie. That's such
Yeah.
a well done film. So I'm really excited. I will pay my
If there was more Michael Jai White in this, this would have been 6 point. This would have been a 69.69.
okay. All right. That is for one more shot. Eric's review, one more shot. That is 5 stars, available now on digital and demand. Final recommendation of the week. In theaters, January 19th. I can't wait. I hope eventually, not like, look, me, Eric, and Bruce, we have around 3 to 5, well, actually 4 to 5 movies to watch next week. Eric, I don't know if you're going to be able to even fit this into your schedule, but Antonio Banderas, I don't know. I think I'm assuming you're a big fan of his
Yeah.
work, right? 13th Warrior. I'm sure you love that movie. I love the people.
Desperado,
Desperado, Zorro, Mask of Zorro, all that stuff.
Spy Kids 3D.
There you go. There you go. A lot of good stuff. So Alice Eve and Antonio Banderas, they're in this new movie called Cult Killer. And it centers on a private investigator played by Antonio Banderas and his like partner, protege, his partner played by Alice Eve. It says here, they're drawn into a web of intrigue when they start tracking a serial killer targeting a wealthy family with a dark secret. So, two private eyes, Antonio Banderas, Alice Eve, they're tracking down a serial killer who is murdering different people. And you don't know who those people are. They might be that killer's target might be a very rich family in the neighborhood. So, that is the premise of Cult Killer. What's interesting about the synopsis is not, it's a little bit inaccurate. And I don't want to say why it's inaccurate because stuff happens in this movie. Okay. There are some twists and turns regarding Cult Killer. I will say this, the serial killer, I can actually announce who the serial killer is. She is played by Shelley Hennig, and she is fantastic in this movie as a serial killer. Now, ultimately, she will have a really interesting connection with the Alice Eve private eye character as well. And Antonio Banderas, he serves as sort of the father figure to Alice Eve in this film. Some of this movie, it takes place in flashback as well. There's a lot of stuff going on. As a huge Brian De Palma fan, there are some really outrageous things that happen in this movie that I think some people will just go, "What will just get annoyed by. I loved it. It really goes for some interesting twists, and the third act where you see this serial killer and Alice Eve, they have their confrontation. It's so well done, as well as what happens to the people who are the targets of the serial killer. Yeah, and Antonio Banderas, I mean, I've never seen him bad in any movie, and we've over in Find Your Film and as well as Cinematics, we've reviewed our share of Antonio Banderas in theaters for one weekend, but then eventually on digital and on demand movies. And I think we ended up really liking him in a lot of the films, no matter what kind of quality they're in. I really enjoyed him in Cult Killer as well. I liked his character, and I can't specifically say why I really appreciated his character. I could relate to his character in many different ways. It is directed by John Keyes, written by Charles Burnley. This is one of these movies that you might think it's a cheap grade Z level movie, and it's really well shot and really well executed. There is a sequence where Alice Eve is questioning somebody, and it's just funny. I mean, it's probably unintentionally funny, but it worked for me. And I just really love Cult Killer. I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Again, in theaters January 19th. Worth a look if you're a fan of Alice Eve, Antonio Banderas, and if you're a fan of these type of twisty thrillers. It's just, and to be honest, Shelley Hennick steals a movie from both of them. So it's just a really well done film. And I don't know, maybe you have the link, Eric. If you have time, give Cult Killer a shot. Tell me what you think. I know this is definitely not a movie for Bruce Purkey. So
I plan to watch it after I watch One More Shot again.
okay, very, very good. So I mean, it's a short episode. We're gonna actually not that short because we're gonna put Bruce's segment right after this episode. And anything else you want to say before we go? And then we're gonna go into our spoiler for Driving Madeleine. My question for the spoiler, and it's not really a spoiler, but this is sort of a question I'll ask Eric, and we'll leave it at the end of the podcast. So anything else you want to say or plug or whatnot?
No, well, I believe we have like the big all interview episode coming out, or is that mistaken on that?
The all interview. Well, I'll probably put your interviews.
I know we got a bunch of them backlogged, but
yeah.
maybe
So
on the Find Your Film
so
feed
I'll
or
put
something.
yeah, in about a couple of days, there's so much stuff you've done, Eric. I've got to put them up. So I'm gonna put this up. This is Wednesday. I'll be putting
Yeah.
this up hopefully very, very soon. And then after that, you'll hear Eric's interviews with the actors from Sunrise and what else, and the director from Which Brings Me to You. That will consist of one episode. But then there's other stuff that he's done. You've done some Sundance, Slam Dance stuff. There's two sets of interviews there. I'm trying to think from memory.
Oh wait, never mind. I thought I forgot a review, but I think that's for next week. So no, we're good. We're good. My
Yes,
brain's just catching up to me right now.
right. So you okay? Your brains is you need to go to the hospital?
No.
Do you have a brain situation? You're okay with the brain? So Bliss is, I think the movie was Bliss, and I think you can, if you want, you can cover it
Yes.
next. Okay, so you can cover Bliss next week, and as
Yeah,
far as reviews go.
that hasn't released yet, so we got to wait for next week on that. But dude, I
Okay.
cannot wait for Bliss to come out so everyone can see that. That movie is so good.
Okay,
And then
very
Virgil Bliss, they need to re-release that because that one is just as good.
okay. I'm sure I have
Go
your
go,
Bliss
go to
interview.
Slam Dance or Sundance or whatever those are playing and watch Bliss if you can.
Yeah.
Totally worth it.
All right, that is it for episode 225 of Cinematics. Hopefully, one of these movies will be. Look, I'm saying my top pick this week is Driving Madeleine. You can't go wrong as well with Which Brings Me to You and Cult Killer. But what, Eric, one more time for your top pick of the week, one more shot. Anything you want to say before we go? But go see this
Well,
movie.
with the actual reviews, it's toss up between Driving Madeline and Which Brings Me to You. But Sunrise was interesting too. One More Shot was Jesus. One More Shot was great.
All right, guys, we will see you next week for episode 226. Bruce will be back, but most importantly, let's listen to what Bruce has watched the last week as far as Oscar Beatty movies. Listen and see if he likes it, and most importantly, tell us what you think of these movies as well. We will be back very, very soon. And remember, towards the end of this, we're gonna have a little bit of a section regarding the spoilers for Driving Madeleine. Please see it in theaters January 19th. And with that, Bruce.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining Cinematics.
Hey everybody, sorry I couldn't be on the show this week. I am trying to catch up on a bunch of 2023 releases. Unfortunately, I will, of course, fall short. There are way too many out there, and some that are still in theaters that I won't be able to catch before awards season hits, probably. We'll see. Maybe I'll get some of them. Either way, I will be back on the show as normal next week, and the other two guys probably have already given you a bunch of good new releases to think about before I even popped up on the show. Either way, I'm going to cover 5 2023 releases that I caught this week. I'm going to hit them really quick, just give you my quick impressions and whether you guys should check them out yourselves. First up is the movie Bottoms, that I know Anderson and crew over at the Film Vault quite love. Bottoms is directed by Emma Seligman, who also was behind, I believe, Shiva Baby. Also co-starring the same star of Shiva Baby in this movie is Rachel Sennott, also from Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. She plays PJ. Her best friend Josie is played by Ayo Edebiri. We also have Ruby Cruz in here, Marshawn Lynch, and a bunch of other people. This is a great, silly, goofy, raunchy, R-rated high school comedy. The big difference here is where, in the past you get things like Superbad, and you've got the two dudes that are, oversexed, wanting to get the girls and try to find a way to be cool, or some other movies similar to that. This movie is your two main characters, PJ and Josie, who are two lesbian people who are at the bottom of the social food chain in high school. And therefore, obviously, they're trying to do anything they can to get noticed and to have a chance to get in with the cheerleaders that they both crush on. So it's kind of flipping the normal kind of, I guess, gender expectations of a movie like this. Very funny, very absurd. I've heard a lot of people comparing it to movies like Superbad and stuff. That's kind of or Booksmart. That's another one that a lot of people have brought up with this movie. I think personally, to go into this movie with the concept of something like Heathers, I think Heathers is a good touchstone, kind of tonally and style-wise, because I think both this and Heathers bring a sort of absurdist, over-the-top, kind of stylistic comic worldview to kind of place this sort of standard high school comedy that you usually get. So I think that is a great way to kind of go into this. I found this to be quite fun, quite funny, smart, but also dumb in all the right ways. I don't know how to describe that, but there are dumb comedies that truly feel dumb and you feel dumbed down watching them, whereas this one is more like the characters and the situations might be kind of silly and dumb, but it's all done in a clever, knowing, winking way at the audience, and there's a lot of little sly social commentary in there, and I think it works. And Marshawn Lynch is really a find for anyone who knew him in his football days. You always knew he was funny, but I didn't know he quite had the chops to take on a bigger role in a movie like he does here. Once again, Rachel Sennott is amazing, but I think the true standout is her best friend, played by Ayo Edebiri. Hope I'm saying the name right. I think she kind of steals the show because where the character of Rachel Sennott is kind of pretty unlikable, fun unlikable, but unlikable. Ayo has to take on a little more heart. And even though she does some things that are also pretty reprehensible, she, at the core, wants to be a, quote, good person. I would say this is highly recommended. This is 4.5 stars for me. Next up, I kind of did up and down between artsy and lowbrow and artsy to kind of give myself some variety as I did this. The next one I watched was Killers of the Flower Moon, which is currently on Apple TV Plus. If you have a subscription there, it is now free to stream there. Martin Scorsese, of course. I never watched the last one he had, The Irishman. Yes, I never watched The Irishman, and I remember I just couldn't do it. And this movie, for whatever reason, even though I know it's 3.5 hours long, I thought I had to dive into this and give it a try. And I've heard good and bad about this movie. I've heard a lot of people say it is quite long and tedious and somewhat unnecessary. But I thought I'd give it a try. You've got your usual suspects here for a Scorsese movie. You got Leonardo DiCaprio playing Ernest. You've got Robert De Niro playing William Hale, and Lily Gladstone playing Molly. A whole bunch of other people, but they are your big stars in this movie. Basic concept of this movie, boy, how do you dive into Killers of the Flower Moon? Killers of the Flower Moon takes place in the 1920s. I think it's Oklahoma. The Osage Native American people, basically, after being pushed all around the United States, like many other Native Americans at that time period, surprisingly, the land that they were settled on ended up being rich in oil. And it starts out by telling us that they become the richest people in the world for that time period per the, I don't know, capita, or per the size of the area that they occupy. And the movie basically takes place showing how different groups of white people that have lived there before or are rushing into there, almost like a gold rush, are finding ways to literally steal the money and the rights to the oil from the Osage people who live there, specifically a lot of the women. And it follows Molly, Lily Gladstone character, as the people around her, her family members, and the white men around her are all essentially picking off all the women in her family and stealing the oil. It's pretty simple as far as the concept goes. I think where you do or don't love this movie kind of depends upon the approach. And I think a lot of people don't like the approach where it's like, I think if you approach it as if it's a mystery, I think it'd be unsatisfied because it's not a mystery. You know who's doing what and you know why they're doing it. And it really comes down to kind of watching a version of, fascism, a version of white supremacy, a version of history that you just don't get, and watching how malevolent and how blunt and how stupid and vicious it is, but effective. And it's disheartening, of course, and horrifying, of course. I think the one drawback, the only thing that keeps us from being 5 stars for me, probably is the fact that the perspective of staying with Ernest and with the Robert De Niro character, as important as it is to see how they use the system or bend the system to get what they want and how they just destroy everything in their path, I always wanted to know more about the Lily Gladstone character and the women on her side of the family. I would have loved to have their perspective, the same story from their perspective, even more. But that being said, the fact that this exists and that we're seeing a version of this, I found really good, really affecting. And surprisingly, I had no problem with the length. And for Eric, who did not see this, I don't remember him seeing this. There is a courtroom sequence in the last, 35, 40 minutes. May not be enough for him, but I'm just telling him that as a slight carrot to possibly attract him to watch this at some point. I go 4.5 stars on this. It probably makes it into my list of 40 best movies of 23. So I think it would make it onto that list, probably. Next up, I watched The Creator by Gareth Edwards. Gareth Edwards famously did one of the reboots of Godzilla and some of the Raid movies. So you know that Gareth Edwards can do big movies. This movie just never looked like something that would quite be my cup of tea, but a lot of people like, middle class, film class, and people like that watched and loved this movie and said that it was pretty great, actually. So I was interested in checking it out, and it's on Hulu. If you have Hulu, you can check this out for free. Creator follows a few basic characters. The main one is Joshua, played by John David Washington, who I actually like in pretty much everything he's done. I know some people don't like his acting as much. I pretty much like him pretty much in everything. Alfie, which is a young, like a simulant, I think they call them. They're like basically robots. A young robot girl you've probably seen in all the posters. Played by Madeleine Voiles. I got the name right. I'm so terrible with names. There's strengths. The strength in this movie is not the plot. The plot is pretty basic in a lot of ways. You have a new version of the world where in America, because there was atomic destruction in parts of America, and they are blamed on simulants that lived in society. They've basically been outlawed and hunted down, and only in New Asia are simulants allowed to kind of be part of human society and kind of accepted as equals to some degree. America and the Western world basically is trying to destroy any rebels or any version of simulants being accepted into society. And they have this thing called Nomad, which is this giant, kind of like a giant flying wing that just floats over the whole Earth, basically like a huge satellite that can just target any spot on the Earth and cause like almost like a mini nuclear warhead hitting. So essentially, you might see this laser sight falling upon you as you're in the middle of a field, and you know that you're doomed because this giant drone is going to take you out. The strengths of this movie. So, and the essential story is Washington playing Joshua. He is originally sent in to destroy this weapon, which is the kid, but for various reasons in his past and for some unfinished business with the woman he loved in his life who was killed by Nomad, he kind of finds himself having to try to save the child robot. Now, that part might be kind of corny, whatever, but the way it's played out is pretty good. I think what this movie has the most going for it is its world building, and I think I've heard that from other people as well, and I definitely agree. The world building here is excellent. Basically, it's kind of on the level you got with especially early James Cameron, the way he would have futuristic tech that seemed plausible in movies like Aliens and movies like The Abyss and stuff like that. That's going on strong in this movie as well. So I think all of that stuff works amazingly well. There are some weird gaps and some kind of jumps in the actual narrative that kind of, I think, detract a little bit from the movie, but I still found myself pretty enthralled throughout. Probably is because a 4-star movie for me, just because of the plot stuff I'm talking about. This is a movie where I actually could see it being a little longer to kind of fill in some of those gaps. And there's a little bit of schmaltz here and there in some of the scenes, but overall, I dug it and I went with it. The fourth movie I watched was No Hard Feelings, directed by Gene Stupnitsky, I believe, starring Jennifer Lawrence as Maddie, Matthew Broderick as Laird, Andrew Barth Feldman as Percy, and there is a little cameo by Kyle Mooney as a nanny. Basic concept. So once again, this is kind of a movie you don't make very much anymore. Kind of this R-rated yet general audience sort of comedy. Kind of a rare thing. And even though it has somewhat of a, quote, controversial concept, I guess, it's pretty middle of the road as far as the actual presentation. This is kind of a crowd-pleasing sort of comedy. Although I enjoyed it quite a bit. Basic concept is Percy is getting ready to go to college. He is 19, if I remember correctly, just to make sure they're keeping ages appropriate. He's nerdy. He has no girlfriends. His parents are worried that he just is at home all the time. He's a nice kid, but they want to make sure he's adjusted. So they basically want to hire a woman to be with him. Be with him, in quotes. They hire Jennifer Lawrence. She is working at a bar. She's trying to work as an Uber driver, trying to make money to keep her parents' house, which she has basically inherited. And of course, now they're in this kind of, in Montauk, so they're in this very kind of upper crust vacation community. So it's very expensive for her to own this house just because of property taxes. Get enough money, she has to have her car to be an Uber driver. Her car's been repossessed. So the deal that is put out there is that if she basically shows their son a few things, then she gets a car. And that's the basic setup. And like, it's predictable in the way that like, oh, she's going to do this. She's just going to, hook up with him and be on her way. And of course, she doesn't care at all about him and he doesn't know what's going on. And of course, he's going to probably find out what's going on and she's going to maybe actually discover he's a good kid and feel guilty. You can kind of figure out all the beats of this movie, but the beats are done well. The comedy scenes are done really well. And surprisingly, Jennifer Lawrence has got great comic chops in this movie. Underrated. I'm surprised it wasn't a bigger hit. I don't know if it's just marketing or the timing. I feel like this came out midsummer. I don't know how it overlapped with movies like Barbie, so maybe that might have had an effect. Or maybe it's just people don't go to the movies to see this kind of comedy anymore. They waited for it to stream. This is a perfect streaming comedy that you can watch with significant other. Saturday night, you want to watch a kind of an easy to watch, fun movie. I think this is a pretty good one. I give this one a 4 stars. I had a great time with it, a lot of fun. Just a kind of movie you don't get much anymore, and I think done very well. We talk about this once in a while. You get a movie that's predictable, action movie, horror movie, something you've seen before, but if you do it really, really well, it doesn't matter if you've seen it before because it's still good. the formula works if it's done well. This is one of those movies. And last, 1001. This is one I know Greg saw early in the year and was sad that we didn't get to see. So I was really curious to catch up to this movie. Directed by A.V. Rockwell, also written, I believe, by A.V. Rockwell. Where did I see this one? Shoot. I think this one might be on Amazon as well. No Hard Feelings, I said, was on Netflix. Yes. 1001 stars a few people. The main people you want to know about in this movie are Teyana Taylor, and she plays Inez. Lucky, her longtime boyfriend slash possibly husband, William Catlett, and then you've got T, or Terry, her son, in various ages. Throughout the movie, I think he starts out, he's about 8 or 9, and then at some point he's about 14 or 15, and then a little bit later he's 17 towards the end, played by Josiah Cross as a 17-year-old, most notably. But all the iterations of T are done very well, and they really did a great job casting the different ages for T. Not only does he seem like he could be the older version of the same kid from each version you've seen before, each generation you see of T is really well acted. So that's probably a lot for a casting director to figure out, to get somebody to play all those parts. It kind of reminded me of Moonlight in that way, having to get someone from different ages to play the same character, and really kind of living or dying on how well you do that. Okay, so basic concept. It starts out with 1994, and you've got Lucky, or not Lucky, I'm sorry. You got Inez in 1994. She's just getting out of Rikers. She's obviously been in some trouble. She's kind of going and looking up and finding her son, who has been put into foster care, and essentially trying to reconnect with him and get her feet back under her. She goes to various friends and people she knows, and they all kind of see her as a several-time loser, someone who's always in trouble. Lucky, the boyfriend I mentioned before, is always in and out of prison as well. So she's living a rough life, and odds aren't looking great for her. This is also in New York. This is going on, living just basically making it, right? And when you first meet T, or she first rejoins with T, he is very suspicious of her, and he essentially looks like he's living on the street. And then at some point he gets hurt. He ends up in the hospital. She essentially kidnaps him. He is supposed to go back into foster care. She is not considered fit to be his mother, and she takes him and changes his identity, jumps through a few hoops to get fake ID for him, and the rest of the movie is essentially how she and he live their lives, with or without Lucky kind of going in and out of their lives, and how she does or doesn't, give him a better life than she had, and tries to keep herself on a somewhat straight and narrow path. That's kind of the strength of this movie, and the performance by Teyana Taylor is remarkable. She could definitely be up for some awards. I doubt she will be, because it was a movie from earlier this year. A really affecting movie. I think it's pretty amazing in a lot of scenes. Some really great character work here. The story, some versions of what we've seen before, but it's really buoyed up by these great and really richly developed and realized characters. Doesn't quite go to 5-star status to me. I'm probably 4 to 4.5 on this one, but it's a pretty great movie, and especially if you like well-drawn dramas with great characters. This one's a no-brainer. All right, that's my roundup. Hope that gives you a few good things to go check out.
All right, Eric. So, Driving Madeleine. Got to ask you this question. When did you just surmise that Madeleine by the end of will die by the end of the film?
So I didn't know necessarily that she was going to die, but it was kind of, do you know when you hear about something and you didn't know what the answer was going to be, but once you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, of course. That's kind of where I was with this, where when I found out she died, I was like, oh, of course I went there, because throughout the movie, as she's telling her story, everything, she doesn't get, her theme is she doesn't get to experience joy for very long. She finds a guy that he likes, and he's immediately an abuser and a rapist.
She finds someone in World War II.
She burns his thing off.
Oh yeah, she does. She burns
and goes to prison for that, but then she finally comes out, and then she can be with her son again, and he goes off to war and dies. Her moments of joy is fleeting. And then I guess that's another cool thing about this is the joy with the taxi driver, the bond that they've grown.
Yeah.
It's a piece of joy in her life, but it's fleeting, So
So like
when
8 hours at the most, right? Probably.
yeah, so when he heard that she died, I was like, "Oh, of course she did." Because this is one of her little crumbs of joy she gets in her life. God forbid she have a full meal of it. She just gets the little crumb. But I think at her age, she's kind of learned to kind of take it in as they come. Because I think she knows that that's kind of almost like a curse on her life. Like,
Mhm.
I don't get these moments much. I'm gonna enjoy this. Like, I'm gonna recognize that this is a joyful situation and take it all in as I can.
For some reason, I was just so enwrapped with the story that I never thought that she would pass away. I don't know. I was clueless. I was naive. I never thought that he would just waive the entire fare, which he probably should have made, what, several $100 that day, and he decides to waive the fare. I didn't. You saw that coming,
I
obviously.
No, so that I saw that as his excuse to go back and see her again. But how long has it been since he dropped her off and he found out she was dead? Because in the movie it felt like it was the
Maybe a
next
day.
day,
The
but
next day, I'm thinking the next day.
I feel like that we might have missed something and it's been a couple weeks. Like, oh, I've been meaning to go back, but I couldn't find the time or something. But
Yeah. In
yeah,
fact,
I guess he did talk to his wife and it's like, hey, I need to meet her.
yeah, I think it was
So
more not even to collect the fare, just to meet her. He wanted
yeah,
to, and what was cool was he's a guy who doesn't really talk in to a lot of the passengers in his car, and he starts opening up a little bit, and then he decides to actually stop the car and have a really lavish dinner with her. Like it, he decides to actually spend. He's the one
yeah,
who spends money on her to have a great meal, right?
yeah.
And it was great. I thought it was a very touching movie. It worked on so many levels, and I can't wait till this comes out on Blu-ray. I'm gonna snatch it up.
Yeah.
By the way, this director, Christian Carrion, what you should do is go on IMDb, look him up. He has a great career. Like I think it's Joy Noel. I'm mispronouncing it. It's called Merry Christmas, and that was I think one of the movies that made Diane Kruger not a star back in the day. Came out in 2005. But what's interesting is about several years ago he released a movie called My Son, and he released a version of the movie back in 2017 starring Guillaume Canet, and I could be wrong on this. I think Guillaume Canet was previously married to Diane Kruger. I don't know. Anyways, there was a version of his movie, My Son or something, was released in 2017, and then several years later it was released as a remake with him doing the remake. This time that movie
Okay.
starred James McAvoy and Claire Foy. So it's really interesting. He is a really well-respected director, and it's cool. Yeah. So very
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm looking at that now. I saw two My Sons. I'm like, which one are you talking about? And why are
Both
there
of
two
them.
of them? I assume one of them was like a short. Sometimes they'll do a short and then they'll do the full movie.
Yeah.
But
His
I guess
most
Michael Haneke did that with Funny
funny games.
Games.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. So Merry Christmas from 2005 is his most popular film, but I think Driving Madeleine is the one that I think it will get a little bit more heat down the road because this is one of those gems that I think people will really dig.
Why do you
And
suppose this movie's coming out now as opposed to like
2022?
this feels like it should be like an award sort of thing.
I know that's a good question. I think they had some kind of distribution strategy, maybe first in Paris, maybe first release it in France,
Yeah, so like there's
European markets.
like driving Madeline, one more shot. Like these should be like Oscar type movies we should
I
be
know.
talking about, but I don't know.
All right, guys, if you listen to our little mini spoiler of Driving Madeleine. Oh, by the way, finally, when she passes and he visits her, what happens at the end? He and the driver, his wife, and their daughter, they visit her gravesite at the end. Is that what they do? They visit her gravesite and
It looked like it's weird because at first I thought it was a crypt, but and it might be, but
yeah, I
it
think you're
was just
right.
like a little tiny plaque among
Plaque,
other plaques,
other plaques. Yeah. So they what is it called? A mausoleum? I don't know. Anyways,
probably
in the cemetery, they go there, they see her name in the plaque and everything, and they're leaving, and then her lawyer or representative or maybe financial advisor or
pops up.
yeah, her estate person pops up
Hey,
with a
I'm here to
letter.
serve your papers.
Yeah,
What?
yeah. Yeah, he
No, this
pops
is a
up.
good one. You'll
Yeah, and then he it's a nice touching letter, and then she says, "Oh, by the way, I sold my house and I can't enjoy it in the afterlife." Sort of a cherry on top to that
Yeah.
ending. As a writer, what did you think? Do you think that cherry on top was a little bit too much, or was it
Um,
perfectly
I,
fitting before because of what the movie
I
is?
thought that whole scene was kind of unrealistic. Just the lawyer popping up out of nowhere, like, "Hey, you're so and so. Here's your thing." It was like,
Yeah,
"Wait, where do you come from? How do you know who that is?" And like, none of this makes sense, but you just kind of go with it. And then as he's reading her letter, I was like, she. Well, I guess that goes back to her knowing that everything's fleeting, and the only way that she wouldn't be able to, well, yeah, how does she know she's gonna die? It's like she had heart problems. Like, yeah, but
I think she knew at the
I,
look. I,
I,
I think she knew
I
after writing that letter, she was because she had heart problems. This was pretty much her expiring at that night.
maybe, but like the letter that she wrote seemed a little too, what's the word?
Sappy, sentimental.
No, not sappy. It feels like she knew too much about her future that
Mm,
humans don't typically know. But
mm,
again, this is a movie, so you kind of let the stuff like that go. It
yeah.
just seemed kind of odd to me, but it still kind of worked regardless.
Yeah, and of course she leaves him her house, which
Yeah.
probably nets a pretty good little sum of money, and it's mentioned throughout the movie that he has
I guess it'd be like
financial troubles. Yeah.
if my health wasn't great and I wrote you and I was like, "Dear Greg, if you're reading this, it means I died May 22nd, 2024 at 11:37 p.m. And as such, this means that blah 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 blah." It's like, no, an awful lot of details of your passing that I don't believe that you actually know.
That is true. Yeah. Anyways, I really liked the ending. It was everything that Eric said, maybe just felt not out of place, a little bit too much, but I
I
wanted
guess
that
like too
sugar.
convenient maybe.
Yeah.
But
Too
but
convenient, but
also at the same time with the story like that, you want
nice.
a satisfying ending.
Yeah. At the end, you want a nice warm hug, even though that doesn't, I don't know, does it feel very realistic? No, it's a movie. So I think overall, I think it put a nice dot on that I. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah, Driving Madeleine. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Yes, Eric, you want to say something before we get out of here?
Oh no, I was gonna say the real ending was when he first finds out and then he brings his wife to the room
Oh, yeah. Oh, right.
and,
And
and it's like
breaks.
she's not there. And like he doesn't care. He just wants to bring his wife to the room. And like I
That
could
was,
see him like bringing her there and like she's like trying to console him and like what I thought would like him talking to like maybe a leftover picture of her or something. It's like here's my wife and but just through his grief, just kind of letting
mm.
it all out there. I think that would have made more sense than him reading a note from her basically predicting her death. Probably would have been a lot more emotionally realistic, perhaps.
Perhaps, but yeah, very interesting. Yeah, but that wasn't it. That if they ended it that way in the sort of in the nursing home, that would have worked too. So yeah, tell us what you guys think of Driving Madeleine. Hopefully some of you get to see this movie, and thanks for listening to us here over at Cinematics.